At the end of a normal workday in Singapore, a 28-year-old British trader stands up from his desk, walks out of the office, and leaves behind a short note that reads, "I'm sorry." Then he vanishes. He boards a plane, not back to London, not to explain what that message meant, but to run. Days later, the shock of what he has done travels 6,700 miles from Singapore to London, straight into the heart of one of Britain's oldest and most prestigious financial institutions, Barings Bank. Founded in 1762, older than the United States, a bank that financed empires, governments, and even royalty, now facing losses so large they don't just damage the bank, they erase it. This wasn't a global crash, not a war, not decades of bad decisions. It was one trading desk in Singapore, one office, the same young man making the trades that would bring everything down. This is the story of how one trader's secret bets in Singapore destroyed a 233-year-old bank and triggered one of the most shocking financial collapses in modern history. For more than 2 centuries, Barings wasn't just a bank. It was a symbol. Old money, old power, old confidence. It held an account belonging to the Queen, the kind of institution that feels like it should outlive the people running it. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, finance was changing fast, becoming global, electronic, and more aggressive. And Barings, like so many old institutions, wants to evolve. So it looked east, to Asia, where markets were growing quickly and new financial products were booming. At that time, Japan was one of the largest financial markets in the world. Singapore was rising fast as a major trading hub. Money was moving through the region at incredible speed. For a bank like Barings, Asia wasn't just an opportunity, it was essential for growth. If they wanted to compete with bigger, more modern banks, they needed a presence there. So they decided to enter the fast-growing world of derivatives trading in Asia. Derivatives, like futures and options, are contracts that let traders bet on where markets are going. They allow someone to control large amounts of money with relatively little upfront cash. That makes them powerful, and if used carefully, profitable. In 1992, Barings opened a futures and options operation in Singapore, trading on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, SIMEX. And to run this new operation, they sent a young 25-year-old British trader named Nick Leeson. Leeson wasn't a Wall Street superstar. He didn't come from elite financial circles. He started in Barings' back office, handling settlements and fixing trade errors. He understood how the system worked. In Jakarta, he had successfully cleaned up a messy trading operation and impressed senior management. He looked reliable, efficient, trustworthy. It seemed like a safe decision, and on paper, the job was simple. Buy contracts in one market, sell them in another. Profit from tiny price differences. This strategy is called arbitrage. It's usually steady, predictable, and low risk. But the real risk wasn't the strategy, it was the structure. Barings made a small, technical decision, one that would change everything. They allowed Nick Leeson to control both sides of the operation. He placed the trades, and he oversaw the team responsible for recording and reporting those trades. The trader and the referee were the same person. Without a separation between trading and oversight, Leeson would place trades the bank had not approved, and then adjust the records to hide losses. And for a while, everything looked extraordinary. Profits flowed in, huge ones. In 1994 alone, Leeson's operation reportedly generated around 10% of Barings' total profits. In London, he wasn't questioned, he was praised. The young trader in Singapore became the bank's rising star, the man delivering miracle numbers from Asia. His bonuses grew, his reputation grew, his authority grew, and personally, the young trader began enjoying the lifestyle that comes with being the man delivering those kinds of profits. What was meant to be careful, low-risk arbitrage no longer looked ordinary. It looked exceptional. It looked untouchable. All orchestrated by a young trader now seen as a financial prodigy. For a while, the profits kept coming, but quietly, the strategy had changed. Nick Leeson was no longer making small, balanced arbitrage trades. He was placing massive bets on the direction of Japan's stock market, especially the Nikkei 225, Japan's main stock index. The Nikkei 225 tracks 225 of the largest companies in Japan, companies like Toyota, Sony, and Honda. It's often used as a quick measure of how Japan's economy is performing. Leeson was betting that this index would rise. But when those bets started losing money, years before the final collapse, he didn't report it. He hid the losses. He even made bigger bets to try to win the money back. When those failed, he bet even more. Each new trade was larger than the last. The numbers escalated fast. What started as manageable losses turned into massive exposure. Soon, the risk wasn't just dangerous, it was overwhelming, far bigger than Barings could handle. Then came January 17, 1995. A powerful earthquake struck Kobe, Japan. Buildings collapsed, highways twisted. The country was in shock. And when markets opened, investors panicked. The Nikkei fell sharply. Leeson had been betting it would rise. Instead, it plunged. And with it, his losses exploded, surging into the hundreds of millions of pounds. Back in Singapore, the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, SIMEX, began demanding more money from Barings to cover the growing losses. Because when a trader's losses grow, the exchange requires extra cash as security. This is called margin. It's a safety rule. If your bets become riskier, you must put up more money to prove you can cover potential losses. SIMEX wasn't doing anything unusual. They were just following the rules. And the rules were warning that something was very wrong. But in London, senior executives still believed the Singapore desk was profitable. They kept wiring money, tens of millions, then hundreds of millions, trying to meet margin calls without fully understanding why they were necessary. By February 1995, the hidden losses had reached more than 800 million pounds, roughly $1.3 billion at the time, more than the entire capital of Barings Bank. On February 24th, senior management finally uncovered the scale of the disaster. There were massive unauthorized positions. There were falsified records. There was no effective oversight. The bank was insolvent. After 233 years in operation, Barings could not survive the losses. On February 26, 1995, the Bank of England scrambled to save it. Emergency meetings, frantic phone calls. They tried to find a buyer willing to absorb the losses. No one would take the debt. After more than 2 centuries of history, Barings collapsed. But even before London could understand the full scale of the disaster, back in Singapore, Nick Leeson already knew. On February 23, 1995, days before the collapse became public, he stopped trading. He printed the final numbers. He looked at the total. There was no fixing it. No next bet. No way back. So he stood up from his desk, and before walking out of the office, he left a handwritten note. 2 words: "I'm sorry." After leaving Singapore, Nick Leeson tried to outrun the story. He moved through Malaysia and Thailand, eventually arriving in Germany. But by then, the financial world was already looking for him. On March 2nd, 1995, at Frankfurt Airport, he was arrested. Extradited to Singapore, the city where the trades were placed and the losses were hidden. In December 1995, a Singapore court sentenced him to 6.5 years in prison for fraud and deception. He was sent to Changi Prison, a maximum security facility. Inside, he was housed alongside gang members, triad groups, and violent offenders. 3 men to a 6 by 9 foot cell, sleeping on the rough concrete floor. The toilet and shower were in the same space, and the heat was relentless. For a man who had lived inside trading rooms and boardrooms, the shift was total. At one point, after refusing to return to a cell assignment, he was placed in solitary confinement, a disciplinary isolation cell. No windows, no ventilation, lights on at night, off during the day. He stayed there for 31 days. To pass the time, he walked slowly back and forth in the 6 by 9 foot cell. 750 steps marked 1 hour. The only way he could measure time, he later recalled. Then came something far more serious. He began losing weight, feeling severe pain. Doctors eventually discovered a large tumor. It turned out to be colon cancer. He collapsed in a hospital bathroom and underwent emergency surgery to remove part of his colon. 38 staples across his abdomen. In recent interviews, Leeson has said prison was tough, physically and mentally. Looking back, he admits he wasn't ready for the responsibility he had been given. He was 25 when he moved to Singapore, 28 when he entered prison. He has reflected that he was in a rush, chasing success, chasing recognition, without fully understanding the consequences of his actions. After serving just over 4 years, Nick Leeson was released in 1999 for good behavior. He later moved to Ireland and gradually rebuilt his life. Over the years, he he has taken on various roles, including briefly running a professional football club and later working as a speaker and risk consultant. Today, he often speaks about corporate governance, accountability, and the psychological dangers of unchecked success. He now lives relatively quietly, but his name remains permanently linked to one of the most dramatic collapses in financial history. And what about Barings? In February 1995, after the losses were confirmed, the 233-year-old bank was sold to Dutch bank ING for £1. Yes, £1. The name survived for a time under new ownership, but the original Barings, the independent British merchant bank founded in 1762, was gone. Today, the Barings name exists again, now owned by an American asset management firm. It manages investments, but it is only a shadow of the institution that once financed empires. And at the center of its fall was a single trader. Leeson once said he wanted to be remembered for achievement. Instead, he became remembered for one of the most dramatic financial collapses in modern history.